this lesson, we're going to take a look at the order in which you draw your labs. So before we get started on talking about what order you actually draw your labs in, it's important to understand why we do this. The thing is, you have to realize that every blood tube has a different test. And the other thing that you have to remember is that in each one of these blood tubes, there's a different preservative in them. And these preservatives do different things. So they could keep the blood from clotting, things like that. The problem is that sometimes a preservative that's in one tube can adversely affect another tube or adversely affect another test that's in a different tube. So let's say you draw one sample from one blood sample and you stick the syringe in the tube and you pull it in and put it out, and there's a contaminant and you put it in the second tube. You could technically transfer that preservative from the first tube into the second, and it could actually change the outcome of the results. So let me give you an example of what I mean. So there's this thing called a lavender top tube, or purple top, and this purple top has an additive in it called EDTA, which is an anti-clotting additive. And EDTA has a lot of calcium in it. And let's say you put the syringe in that tube first before you actually send out your calcium, and you're getting a calcium test on your patient. That actually could contaminate that sample, and the calcium could end up being really high when it's actually not. This is just an example of why we do this. So if you're unsure about what the order is, and the specifics of the test, contact your lab, check with your lab, and find out what that is and the ins and outs of what specific tubes you're going to need, that kind of stuff. So let's take a quick look into the different types of tubes that you actually may run into. Now, like we talked about before, you're going to have different tubes for different tests, and a lot of these tubes are going to have different colors on the top. So if you look here and here, and what these pertain to is that they have different preservatives and additives inside each one of the tubes. So we're going to hit the most common types of tubes, and I'm sure you're going to run into some that you'll see once and you're never going to see it again, but these are the most common types that you're going to see. And the first one is blood cultures, and they are little jars, and they look kind of like this. It's really important with these that they are the first one drawn, and we'll go into that in a few minutes. But the thing that you need to understand, there are specifics into how you draw them and how you put them into the jars. There's going to be a great demonstration in this in one of the other videos, so go check that out. Now, the light blue ones are going to be for your coags. So for your coagulation studies, your green and red top tubes, these are going to be used for chemistries. The difference is that the green top tube has a version of heparin in it, and that keeps the blood from clotting. So these are going to be for your quick results. Your red top tubes are going to be more for things like serologies or more complex chemistries, but both of these are used for chemistries. Your lavender top tube is going to be the one that you, like we talked about in the last slide, is going to be the one for your CBC because it has the anti-clotting additive EDTA in it. You can also send out for something like your H&H or your they call it an H&H, but it's a hemoglobin and hematocrit. So we're checking for anemia. The last one you may run into is a gray top tube, and you're going to see this with lactate, or the other one you may see it with is a blood glucose. One thing that I do want you to remember is that this is not a comprehensive list, and this is just like the most probably the most common types that you're going to see. But just check with your facility and talk to your lab if they have specifics that they want for specific types of tests for your patients. What's the actual order that you draw them in? Well, here you go. The first thing we're going to draw is a blood culture, and you always want to do those first. Then you have your light blue top tubes. So these are going to be your coags. And then you have any potential chemistry. So this is going to be your red or green top. And then you have your lavender top. And then you have your gray for lactate or blood glucose. So what happens if you have a BMP and a CBC only? So we don't have all these other ones. So we're not going to have, so our BMP is going to be either a red or green. So for a hospital, probably going to do the green. And if you have a CBC, you're going to use your lavender top tube. So we've got no blood cultures. We've got no coags. We've got no serologies. We only have this green one. We do have the lavender, but we've got no gray. So we're going to do the green top first, and then we're going to do the lavender top tube second. So remember, you don't want to contaminate your tubes with the additives or the preservatives. And so there's one other really important point that I want to reiterate here, and that's if you are unsure of which tube to put it in. So if there's some possibility that a sample could get contaminated, or if it's a really expensive test and you want to make sure that you do it right, then consider drawing a separate sample. Meaning that, hey, I'm going to use one syringe to draw a blood sample, and I'm going to put it in this one tube. And then I'm going to draw a completely separate sample for the other one, because I want to make sure that there's no risk to the patient because I did it wrong, or we contaminated the sample, and then it gets, there's a waste of resources. So just, if you have a question about a test, just make sure you use good nursing judgment. Make sure you're not going to cause any unnecessary risk to your patient by drawing another sample. But get that separate sample if you need to. That way, we make sure the test is right and we're going to get it sent out. So for today's lesson, we really focused on those nursing concepts of using our nursing skills to get our lab sample, and then also focusing on those lab values. So let's recap. Remember that all the test tubes have specific additives, and that's going to be optimal for those types of tests. So make sure that we're not contaminating the other tubes, and by doing them in the right order. So if you have a question about a specific test, ask your lab. Don't hesitate to call them up, find out what the specifics are, and see if you can even draw them with other tests. Always start with your blood cultures, and then do light blue, red or green, lavender, and then finally with the gray. And do you have doubt? Are you unsure of which sample, or if I can even draw these things together? If you're unsure of it, and just use your nursing judgment, make sure that you're not causing any unnecessary risks or cost to your patient, but draw that separate sample. 99 times out of 100, you're going to be totally okay. So that's it for our lesson on drawing labs. Make sure you check out all the resources attached to this lesson. Now go out and be your best selves today. And as always, happy nursing.